Good afternoon. My name is Megan Downey, and I'm the Project Director at Youth Catalytics for the Communications and Dissemination Priority Area for the LEAD Collaborative. And joining me is Pete Rafel, Beth Cantor, and Phoebe Kilgore of Spitfire Strategies, as well as Heather Sullivan, who is serving as the organizer of the GoTo training session today. I've got just a few words to kick us off, and then we'll get right into the training. First, I'd like to welcome all of you to the first of 3 virtual sessions in preparation for the March training for TPP grantees. This session will focus on communicating with decision makers and aims to give you helpful information about which decision makers you should meet with and to offer skills for building relationships with those decision makers. This session will be recorded and will be shared with grantees who could not attend. We also ask that you share this recording with the 1 or 2 representatives from your TPP program who will join us at the March training. This virtual prep session was made possible by grant number 1TPS-AH-160004-01-00 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Adolescent Health. However, the views expressed in the session do not reflect the official policies of the Office of Adolescent Health or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Just a few virtual housekeeping notes. Chrome and Firefox are the preferred browsers for the virtual training prep sessions, with Chrome being ideal for some of the functions that we'd like to use in future sessions. So please, if you're not already a Chrome user, consider switching to Chrome for the next sessions. Feel free to use the chat box feature if you have a question or comment for the presenters, but know that we will be hosting breakout sessions at the end of the training via conference call. Those will not be recorded, but they're going to be just a great opportunity for you to ask trainers your questions directly in smaller groups. As I mentioned, this is a training for TPP grantees. There's another training on a similar topic for Pregnancy Assistance Fund grantees happening now. So if you are a PAF grantee, you want to dial into this other one. Also, there will be a brief set of evaluation questions at the end of the training that will pop up on your screen. Your answers are important to us, so please do take the 2 to 3 minutes that it will take to complete the evaluation. Hopefully most of you have had the opportunity to view the launch webinar for the LEAD Collaborative on Monday, February 13th, when OAH introduced the project and the partners that are working together to provide capacity building assistance to TPP grantees. We encourage you to watch the recording of that webinar if you missed it, read the LEAD Collaborative newsletters, and take advantage of the opportunities at the March training to get to know all of the LEAD Collaborative providers and the CBA available to you. Youth Catalytics is a LEAD Collaborative partner in the Communications and Dissemination Priority Area. We're a nonprofit training and research organization that is focused on building the capacity of youth-serving organizations for the past 35 years. For this project, we've teamed up with Spitfire Strategies, a leading communications firm that has partnered with some of the nation's most influential foundations and nonprofits to help them to communicate effectively. You will have the opportunity to meet all of us at the March training in person, and I encourage you to contact me directly for more support and assistance in the weeks leading up to and after the March training. My contact information will be shared at the end of this session. But now, without further ado, let me introduce today's lead trainer, Pete Rafel. Pete Rafel is a Senior Vice President at Spitfire Strategies. He came to Spitfire from the United States Senate, where he was Communications Director for the Environment and Public Works Committee, providing strategic counsel to Senator Barbara Boxer during her first 4 years as chairman of the committee. In addition to acting as primary media strategist for the committee's legislative docket, he worked extensively with the senator's in-state staff on California environmental and infrastructure issues. Before heading to Capitol Hill, Pete spent 5 years as Director of Communications at the Wilderness Society, where he led a cooperative integrated communication campaign that was instrumental in defending the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from oil and gas development and helped shape efforts to incorporate strategic communication in all its program areas and its network of regional offices. So with that, take it away, Pete.
Thank you very much, Megan. Here at Spitfire, we provide communications and strategy training for committed people like you who are working for positive social change. One of our fundamental best practices for smart communications is to tailor your communication plans to the audience you're speaking to. Some things are the same no matter who you're talking to. You need to know all you can about your audience, what they care about, what they already know or believe, and who they are most likely to listen to, for example. When it comes to educating decision makers, people whose job it is to make decisions that affect the people you serve and the programs you manage, there are some special factors to take into account to make sure your interactions are positive and productive. Over the next 90 minutes, we'll be introducing you to some of those concepts to help you tailor your communication so that you're prepared to meet with decision makers and stakeholders at all levels. We're going to cover 4 main things during this session. Why you should engage with decision makers, how to decide who to meet with, how to develop a strategy to build relationships with decision makers, and how to schedule and prepare for a successful meeting. First, we're going to talk about why you should engage with decision makers, what they have to offer you, and what you have to offer them. Build relationships with decision makers because it is an opportunity to educate them about your work and empower them to share that information with others. Building trust with decision makers takes time. You can't wait until you need something to reach out to them. There are a lot of reasons to prioritize long-term engagement with the decision makers, including they make policy decisions in legislation and organizations or regulations that can advance your cause or kill it. They're in the know. They will know when important discussions are coming up and what other decision makers are thinking and doing. And they have a pulpit. They often have more media exposure than you do. Now, decision makers don't hold all the power here. They also have important reasons for engaging with you. Decision makers, especially elected leaders, are extremely busy people. They're asked to understand a wide range of topics. They don't have the capacity to have your expertise and sustained focus. They will also look to you for connections to important stakeholders who they care about. You provide them a service they value when you become an honest broker of information. Before we get started, I want to define what we're talking about today. For the purposes of today's discussion and the training at the end of March, here's who we mean when we talk about decision makers. The most important defining characteristic is that they have official responsibility for making decisions that affect how you do your work. This is different from the audiences your work aims to reach on a day-to-day basis, audiences like teenagers, teachers, and health workers, who you are trying to persuade to make better decisions about their own lives or take some other specific action. With decision makers, you're communicating with them to educate them about the work you do and the people whose lives it affects. Decision makers who are elected need to understand your work so they can represent their constituencies and stakeholders. Civil servants need to know what you're doing as they make decisions about how to administer programs. And leaders of other important partners need to know about what you do so that they can make decisions about how their organizations will cooperate or partner with you. Decision makers can include your senator or representative at the national level, or the local mayor and school board members in your community. When you meet with decision makers, your goal will be to educate them about what your organization does and why the work matters. This process of educating decision makers will likely include sharing information, for example, reports about your work and the positive impact it has, sharing stories about the personal impact your work has for people in the community you serve. The point here is to develop long-term relationships and connections so that you can continue to share information about your work with the decision makers that matter most to you. When educating decision makers, you are not talking about specific legislation or rules, asking for official action or for funding. And before we go any further, I want to pause for a quick public service announcement. For those nonprofit organizations that are restricted in their lobbying, it's important to be aware of the 4-part definition of lobbying under the tax code. To be clear, we're talking What we're talking about now is not lobbying. Grantees are not allowed to lobby, but you can and should be educating decision makers about your programs and the work you're doing in your community. Here's a simple test that makes it really easy to determine if your ask is lobbying. Is it direct communication with a decision maker or his or her staff, expressing a position or call to action on a piece of legislation, existing or proposed? If the answer is yes, you are lobbying. And lobbying and fundraising are both prevented under TPP program funding. If you have concerns about whether your organization is permitted to lobby or whether your private foundation funding may be used for lobbying, consult your lawyer. He or she will know best. Next, we're going to talk about how to determine which decision makers to meet with. Once you've set your objective, the next step is identifying and getting to know the decision maker you will be meeting with. When identifying your decision maker, think about where the decision will be made. This will likely be either the legislative or executive branch. The judicial branch, of course, makes decisions based on law, not policy, so they're not relevant to this conversation. For legislative decisions, consider how the legislative body runs. Are the committees powerful or subject to the whim of the leadership? Which committees will have jurisdiction over the things you work on? And who are the key staff or principals with whom you want to share information? For executive decisions, think about who the ultimate decision maker is. Will they look to their staff to inform a decision? What is their general decision-making process? For local decisions, again, consider who the ultimate decision maker is, who on their staff helps them make decisions, and what their general decision-making process is. And don't forget everyone who falls into the other category, including local partners and community organizations. There are many people who make important decisions that impact your work at these organizations, and each of them have their own personal decision-making process that you will likely need to consider. When considering decision makers to engage with, there are three general groups to consider. Champions are the people who are always going to support the work you're doing. Just because they are already supportive doesn't mean you don't need to cultivate relationships with them, though. Continue to thank them when they meet with you and maintain regular contact with them and their staff so that you maintain the relationship. Outreach plans often focus on people who are on the fence about your work. They might be leaning one way or the other, but they will look to experts and constituents before making a final decision. And opposition. These people have already made up their minds about your work. They're not supportive, and there's not much you can do to change that. While considering who to begin forming relationships with, also keep in mind that building relationships is about power. So you need to understand the power dynamics at play. Who has the power to impact your work, either for better or worse? We're going to talk through some things to keep in mind regarding power dynamics now. Power dynamics are often a game of follow the leader. Whether you're at the local, state, or federal level, those in power decide what is going to move and what isn't. And leadership decides what comes up for a vote. That doesn't mean the minority doesn't have power, but they do typically have less. So if you're partnering with someone in the minority, you'll need to think about what decisions they are actually able to make. Most legislatures and organizational boards of directors structure themselves into committees, each with its own focus: health, environmental protection, programming, etc. The advantage of this approach is that the decision makers on a committee develop expertise in the topics assigned to that committee, and their opinions on those matters carry extra weight. So it's smart strategy to engage with a decision maker who sits on a committee that is relevant to what you work on. And of course, it's great to interact with a member of the committee, but even better to interact with the committee chair. Large organizations, including legislatures and public agencies, are like high schools. Seniority is often synonymous with power. Through many years of service, veteran decision makers often also tend to wield informal power that extends beyond formal titles. So educating a seasoned decision maker can help you get traction. But keep in mind that you'll face more competition for the attention of senior decision makers, and they have often narrowed their focus to a few programs and policies. So if you're looking for some of the most powerful elected officials or civil servants, those who have served the longest are the obvious choice. But before you do that, stop and consider if they are really the ones who are going to be the best people to help you educate them about your program. On the other hand, decision makers are probably junior decision makers are probably easier for you to access. Junior people are more concerned with developing their expertise and building their reputation, and they may be easier to access or a better choice if you need someone to raise a specific topic. You'll see them doing more listening tours and taking more meetings with groups from different backgrounds. And they're doing this because they want to put their ears to the ground and are looking for something they can attach their name to and make their own. In addition to power mapping, it's also important to understand the relationship dynamics of the decision makers you wish to educate. Decision maker is driven by personal relationships, and understanding those relationships can help you determine where to start your education efforts. For example, if two decision makers have partnered several times in the past, educating one will help you to educate the other. Now that you've chosen the decision makers you want to engage, you need to know as much as you can about them. Ask yourself the following questions. What do they value? Where do your values align with theirs? Whose opinions do they value? What you care about most might not be what they care about most, but you can still align on a topic. You should also consider who you know that knows them and might be able to help open the door. Once you've identified your decision makers, the next piece is getting to know them a little bit. Research is key. Take the time to familiarize yourself with your decision maker's biography, current staff, and priority programs and policies. Because there are so many publicly available resources to find this kind of information, most decision makers will assume that you have basic information before entering a meeting. Fortunately, it's easier than ever to research decision makers. Since many of the decision makers you'll be talking to are public figures, there's a tremendous amount of information easily accessible via the internet. Here are a few of the helpful resources that can help you track what your decision maker is working on, any relevant background, and what is likely to help them reach their position. With just 30 minutes of research, this is information I was able to find about Representative Jerry Connolly of Northern Virginia. There are some themes here that indicate what Representative Connolly is likely to care about. For example, he has a long history in government and lots of foreign affairs and policy experience. It's easy to do the same quick research with local decision makers. Chairman Bulova is the chairman of the board in my hometown of Fairfax in Virginia. If I was going to talk to the chairman about my teen pregnancy prevention program, based on this research, I would focus on her commitment to education, why it benefits the community, and may also make the personal connection to her as a mother and grandmother. In addition to this online research, when you get to the local level, you will also likely rely more on your personal relationships and networks to learn about your audience, as opposed to publicly available information. So next we'll talk about how to make the most of those networks. When thinking about how to connect with a decision maker, it's important to make sure you select the right messenger to introduce you or partner with on the meeting. This means not just looking at whose calls the decision maker will take, but who he or she calls for advice when it comes to tough decisions. When doing your research, keep an eye out for information that indicates who the decision maker listens to and how your organization might be connected to them. Use your network to dig around and find out who makes up your decision maker's social reference sphere. Your board is usually a good place to start. Funders can also be helpful here. Social reference groups are the people who a decision maker calls when making a decision that is important to your organization. When selecting the right messenger, you need to think beyond whose calls the decision maker is likely to take, but who they are likely to pick up the phone and call to ask for advice on a topic. Is a trusted friend from law school who is now a well-known scholar a good choice? Is it their minister, bishop, or rabbi? Is it the business leader who's been a major financial backer? As I mentioned on the last slide, your personal reference group is also important for researching your decision maker when there isn't as much publicly available information. You should ask around to get information that indicates what your decision maker cares about and what about your work they are likely to value. Now that we understand the importance of engaging decision makers, we're going to discuss the logistics of how to set up these meetings. First, obtain the phone number of the key person or organization or office you want to meet with. Write out the request before you make the phone call so that you can be sure you cover all the important points about why you are requesting the meeting. Speak with the scheduler. Be prepared to draft a letter. When speaking to the scheduler, specify that you want to meet with the principal or key person you have identified. Express that you understand they have a busy schedule, but meeting with him or her is very important and that you're willing to work with their schedule on that day. If their schedule does not permit a face-to-face meeting, express to the scheduler that you would be pleased to meet with his or her designee, for example, their chief of staff or the staff person who handles healthcare. Finally, follow up on that invitation. Here are some helpful hints. Always be polite. The scheduler is the gatekeeper, so make sure you're always respectful. The scheduler you're contacting today could one day be a key contact. Be patient but persistent. Schedulers usually schedule a meeting no more than a week out and often schedule meetings just a few hours prior. Make a local connection. Be sure you say up front in your meeting request if you live in his or her community, district, or state. Or connect to their favorite topics. Tie your meeting to something the person cares about. Consider what committees they're on, the programs and policies they're on record speaking about, bills they have sponsored, large employers in their area, topics that are making headlines in their local papers. The last thing a scheduler wants their boss asking is, why am I doing this meeting? Now, you all know where the line between education and lobbying is, but the people you're meeting with probably don't. Inevitably, you'll get a question that would require you to cross that line. For example, a staffer for an elected official might say, my boss has a bill about this. Do you support her approach? Or what funding level should we include in the budget for this issue? You'll want to be ready to gracefully acknowledge the question and turn things back to what you're there to discuss. The best bet is to be straightforward. I am only here today to share information about my organization's teen pregnancy prevention work, and I'm not in a position to comment on specific legislation or funding levels today. Always send a follow-up thank you letter reiterating the points made during the meeting. If you promise to provide more information, provide it. Don't drop the ball. This is your opportunity to prove that you're a resource. When we only talk about facts and figures, we miss an opportunity to talk about the impact of the work we're describing. Take healthcare policy as an example. When I talk about concepts like coinsurance, deductibles, and mandates, it's like showing you this picture of an empty hospital room. It's sterile and hard to relate to. But when we connect our work to people, like this patient and the doctor caring for her, healthcare comes alive. When we talk about how policies affect real lives of people that we've made a connection, then we've made a connection that has the potential to inspire others to action. So remember, decision makers care about people. That's what you need to focus on talking to them about. I'm just going to talk quickly about what's going to come next here. So these are the elements that are going to be covered when you're here for the in-person training. We're going to talk about the elements of a successful meeting. We're going to teach the fundamentals of strategic storytelling and have a chance to practice that. We're going to do some preparation of spokespeople so that they can be effective educators for decision makers. And here's the details for the upcoming virtual training prep sessions. That one's next week, February 28th at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We'll have a messaging workshop on March 7th, again at 2 o'clock Eastern. And just a reminder that all the virtual training preparatory sessions will be recorded and shared with grantees before the March in-person training. As Megan mentioned, here's her contact information, and all of this will be available to you afterwards as well. So that concludes our presentation today. Megan, did you want to say anything else before? Yes.
No, thank you very much, Pete. I think you covered it all. The only thing I would say is don't forget to complete the evaluation questions that will pop up on your screen in about 2 minutes after this slide goes down. And I look forward to joining you in the breakout sessions.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody, for your attention today, and we look forward to talking to you on the breakouts.